Okay, I think we are live. I'm trying to do this myself here, so bear with me. Okay, yeah, we're live. How's it going, folks? I think we are on, so give me a shout if you are seeing this. Just wanted to make sure we've got viewers. Let's see. Everybody hearing me? So, I'm in Yerevan, Armenia. Yeah, here we go. Okay, now I'm starting to see the comments. Good deal. Okay, great to see y'all. It's been a while. I've been out. Actually, we've been doing a tour in Armenia for the last week, 10 days. And so I haven't been on CBN's YouTube very much. Just been super busy. I have been doing some lives on my own YouTube, and you can go over there. Chuck Holton's, it's called The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube. I have been doing almost daily lives over there, just showing you the beauty of Armenia and talking about some of the issues in Israel, in Ukraine, immigration, all that kind of stuff like we always do. So I'm very happy to see you all on with us. Hello, Brazil. Wow, amazing. Yeah, thank you for, if you want to boost the algorithm, go subscribe to the channel. And of course, leaving comments helps too. Lets YouTube know that people want to see what we are talking about here. So I just want to get right into it because I don't have a ton of time and I got a lot to talk about. Just want to check my audio here. Audio looks good. Okay, so I want to quickly explain the title of the live that I did here because I don't want it to sound like I'm engaging in clickbait or anything. Here's the thing that we're seeing. The Biden administration is starting to get a little worried that immigration is going to hurt them. The immigration crisis is going to hurt them in the upcoming presidential election. And so they are taking steps to make it look like, at least, that they are reducing the number of people coming across the border. They actually are reducing the numbers for the time being. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to reduce the total number of people coming into the United States without a visa. What I mean is, of course, virtually everybody who comes into the United States without a visa, illegally, as we would say, some people would say, they are coming in making an asylum claim. They're saying, I have to flee my country of origin because I'm being persecuted by my government, and therefore I need to take asylum in the United States. Now, we have shown over and over and over again, if you've been watching any of my lives, there's actually a great documentary that just came out by the Epoch Times that shows the crisis in the Darien Gap, talks a lot about it, and it's an excellent documentary. And I'm not going to say anything to try to take away from that. The only thing I'm going to say is that these guys were a little tardy to the game. Me and some of my compatriots have been reporting on these issues for literally quite a few years. I mean, I started reporting on the immigration crisis in 2007 and started reporting heavily on the Darien Gap in 2012. And so I don't know if I was one of the first to start reporting on this problem, but we've been bringing other journalists along and helping to get the word out for several years now. So my friend Michael Yan, Oscar Blue Ramirez, Ben Berquam came down several times. Laura Loomer has come along, and the Muckraker brothers and the Epoch Times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've had a lot of people come down to the Darien Gap and start looking at and take them out to the Darien, show them the scope and the scale of the problem, and all of that media, all of that play that they've gotten in the media has actually started to make a difference. And so this is the title, the reason for the title of the YouTube that I'm doing here. This difference that has been made is that now, up until a few years ago, well, actually up until really just about a year ago, the Panamanians didn't really know much about the scale of the problem in the Darien Gap. They knew that there were migrants coming through the Darien Gap. That was in the news, but there wasn't much besides that. The reason is that the government of Panama at the time really didn't want the Panamanian people to know a whole lot about the details because it was not pretty for Panama. It cost Panama millions of dollars a month to feed and house these migrants and bus them, help them get bused all the way to the Costa Rican border. Panama set up this deal with Costa Rica several years ago called the Controlled Flow Program, which is not a good name for a program. But the Controlled Flow Program, it sounds like a nasal spray or something, was a deal they made with Costa Rica. And Costa Rica would tell Panama, okay, we've got X number of beds open, and so we can take that many migrants from you. And so Panama would then put that many migrants on a bus and send them to Costa Rica. The problem is, Panama had a lot more people coming into their country than they had going out. And so the number of people that were stuck in camps in the Darien Gap kept growing and growing and growing to the point that Panama just couldn't handle it anymore, even with help from the United States and other countries. And so Panama sort of abandoned the controlled flow program and just went to the uncontrolled flow program, where they started busing as many migrants as they could bus to the northern border of Panama. What they don't want is they don't want these migrants staying in Panama any longer than possible. Because if they stay in Panama, they cost Panama money, the crime rate grows up, they take jobs away from Panamanians, and Panamanians don't like that kind of thing. So they put them on a bus, they ship them from the Darien Gap, which is in the eastern part of Panama, to the Costa Rican border, which is in the western part of Panama. A lot of people think that Panama kind of goes north-south. It doesn't. It actually goes east-west. The canal goes north-south. So the eastern part of Panama is in South America. The western part of Panama is in North or Central America. And the dividing line is essentially the canal. So the Darien Gap, touching Colombia, was getting more and more migrants all the time. When I started reporting on the migrant problem in the Darien Gap, 300 a month was a really big crisis. Now we're looking at something like 10,000 every day coming through there. And with 10,000 people coming through every day, you talk about, it's not just become a crisis, it's become an industry. And so people all along the way are making money on this, and anything, at one point, 10% or so of the people who came into the Darien Gap did not come out again. They were dying on the way. It was 6 days or more in the jungle, no clean water to drink, no food to eat, bandits, bugs, animals, death from exposure, death from drowning, death from falls, death, just waited around every turn. And so a lot of people were dying in the Darien Gap, and a lot of people were being taken advantage of in the Darien Gap by the cartels that that sort of control the area. I've been on both sides of that, in the Colombian side and the Panamanian side. There are gangs on both sides that take advantage of the migrants and take advantage of the presence of the migrants to ship drugs from Colombia into Panama. Yes, Luis, I said Colombia. Colombia. Right. And so that's been a problem, ongoing and growing problem for a long time. A lot of people, you can't help. I've been down there so many times, you can't help but run into these migrants coming out of the jungle after 6 days. They've got prickly heat all over their body, which is a very, very painful sort of rash. They've got trench foot, which is where the skin on your feet just sloughs off and just leaves this red, raw hamburger underneath. It's extremely painful. You can't walk, with trench foot like that. It hurts too bad. These people have been starved. They've got heat stroke. I mean, you can't help but feel bad for them. And so you want to do something to make it easier, make it better for them to come across. But the problem is, anything you do to make it better means that more will come. And if more come, that's a bigger drain on the resources of the United States, on the resources of Panama. And that just continued to steamroll, just like a snowball going downhill, get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where earlier this year, at the beginning of this year, we had like 10,000 people a day, some days coming across through the Darien Gap. Now, part of the reason that they got so many is because it just got easier and easier as, economies of scale took hold, and these cartels put together packages where people would, if they had enough money, they could pay money and they could take a boat part of the way, they could take a horse part of the way, they could get people to carry their bags for them, they could, ride in a boat, whatever. And that just made it easier for more people to come. They say something like 125,000 of the people that have come through last year were children. And we're talking about babies, breastfeeding babies coming through the Darien Gap, getting dragged through by their parents. Not good for the children, not good for the parents, not good for Panama, not good for anybody. And these people are making asylum claims saying, well, I came from Venezuela. I'm being persecuted by my government in Venezuela, which maybe most people in Venezuela are not being persecuted by their government. They're poor, yes. Their government is about to collapse, yes. Their society is a wreck, absolutely. The people are eating their pets. Crime is the only growth industry. All that's bad, of course. However, none of that qualifies you for asylum in another country. I'm not saying people shouldn't be able to leave. I mean, I think people ought to be able to live where they want to live, go where they want to go. I mean, I'm all for the freedom of movement. But there are legal ways to do it. And especially if a country has social welfare programs that pay money to people who come in without going through the legal process are essentially stealing the resources of the host country, the United States in this case, because they didn't do it the right way. They're taking advantage of those resources. Now, you've heard a lot about the migration crisis, and this is an ongoing big problem, and it's getting bigger all the time. It's caused now the Biden administration to actually start re-implementing some of the Trump-era policies that actually reduced illegal migration during the Trump presidency. They've started building the Trump wall. They would hate me to say that, but they've started building onto the wall in places where migration is the worst, refunding things that they had yanked funding for that would rebuild the wall. They have started putting out messaging trying to stop people from coming illegally to the southern border. Now, I want to talk about two separate things here, okay? We got 1,000 people online. Do me a favor and hit that like button. That really helps YouTube know that they should show this to more people. But I want to show you something here. Well, I'm going to read it to you because it's in Spanish, so I'm going to translate it for you. If you go to Twitter, tell you what, I'll put the link up for you. You go to Twitter and you go to the U.S. Embassy in Panama. So I'm going to put this up so that you can see that I'm not lying about this. Yeah, so even if you don't speak Spanish, you can go look at it and kind of follow along here. The U.S. Embassy at Panama is putting up messages like this one. It says, the most recent message 2 hours ago said, under the migratory laws of the United States, the majority who come across the border without authorization do not qualify to stay in the United States. The laws of asylum don't provide protection against general violence or economic reasons. Now, this is what we've been saying all the time, but yet the Biden administration has welcomed more than 7 million illegal migrants into the United States during their tenure, and have done a lot of things to make it easier for those people to get across and to get into the United States, to get work, to make money, to send money home, to pay taxes. And I'll just, I'll just say it is a drastic change for the official embassy Twitter page from Panama to be putting out the word that people should not think that they can come across the border and get asylum in the United States just because of economic reasons or because of general violence in their countries. That what they're not pointing out is the thing that we've said for a long time, and that is that the people coming across the Darien Gap have to cross through Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, 6 countries from Panama, not to mention probably Colombia if they're leaving Venezuela, and maybe a bunch more countries if they're coming from around the world. So at least 6 countries they have to pass through before they get to the United States. So if they are saying, if their asylum claim is, things are so terrible in my country, I have to go to a better country. I have to go to another country. I have to get away from my government because they're persecuting me. Well, Panama's not persecuting you. Colombia's not persecuting you. Costa Rica's not persecuting you. Neither is Honduras or Nicaragua or Guatemala or Mexico. So you could stay in any of those countries. The vast majority of the 520,000 people who came across the Darien Gap last year on the way to the United States were Venezuelan, fleeing Venezuela. Now, again, I understand why you'd want to flee Venezuela. I would want to flee Venezuela too. But if you're fleeing Venezuela, you speak Spanish, and you're going through 7 Spanish-speaking countries, most of whom, inside most of which you could make a life, get a job, survive, not be persecuted by the government, have more money than you had in Venezuela. I mean, even just in Colombia, the average wage for a base minimum wage worker is like 5 times what it is in Venezuela. So there's no reason, if you're coming out of Venezuela, for you to leave Colombia. If you're just coming out to avoid persecution from your government or to go to a better economic climate. But these people are going through 6 more countries to get to the United States and the Darien Gap, which is not a picnic. Coming to the United States. Why? Because they can make a lot more money in the United States. So literally every person who is not Mexican, who comes across the U.S. southern border illegally, is an economic migrant and does not qualify for asylum. Therefore, we don't need to give them a asylum hearing 3 years from now, and in the meantime they can stay and live and work in the United States. We don't need to do that. We know, and the Biden administration has known since day one, that every person coming across the United States southern border, legally or illegally making an asylum claim, who is not coming from Mexico itself, has absolutely no basis for an asylum claim in the United States. Ipso facto, end of story. And so, it's, to say that we've brought in 7 million of these people, we've allowed 7 million people into the United States illegally, and have given them asylum hearings, and have let them work and send money home to their families in their home countries. We've been complicit. The United States government has been complicit in bringing these people over because they've drawn them, they've sucked them in. Now, why would they do that? Now, a lot of people say, well, they're doing it for the votes. They want these people to vote for them. Well, I'm not going to say that these illegals are not voting in American elections because we really don't know, since we don't have good requirements when it comes to voting for, like, having an ID, showing an ID or anything like that. It's entirely possible and indeed highly probable that there are a lot of illegals who are voting in American elections illegally. This is why in some precincts around the United States, we have more than 100% of eligible voters casting a ballot in the presidential elections. This has happened. It's a thing. This is why so many Americans have lost faith in the American electoral system. But if there are illegals voting in the presidential election illegally in the United States, I think it would be a more difficult point to assert that these people are swinging the vote one way or the other, like they're actually causing one candidate or another to win. Because I don't think there are enough of them that are voting illegally to do that. There may be lots of other shenanigans that are going on that are affecting the legal votes, that are nullifying your legal vote when you go to the ballot box, like ballot harvesting. That's a bigger problem, much, much bigger problem. I mean, if you look at the problems with the American electoral system, not having to show an ID that's a huge problem. But ballot harvesting is a much bigger problem because what you have is subcultures of people in the United States, like the Somalis, for example, who live mostly up like in Minneapolis, places like that. And they are going around, they're activists going around to these Somalis, who many of whom speak virtually no English, and they're saying, hey, it's, you need to vote. So tell you what, here's the mail-in ballot. We'll mail it for you. You just sign your name to it. It's already filled out for the Democratic candidate. And they get bags and bags and bags of these things, have people sign them, and then they go over and dump them in a mailbox someplace. That is a serious, real, provable, major problem in the U.S. voting system, without a doubt. Now, the reason that the U.S. federal government, that the Biden administration wants 7 million or 10 million or 20 million, they want a lot more people coming into the United States, and they know the system is way too slow to get the number of people in that they need, and so they just encourage all the illegal migration they can, try to get as many illegals into the United States as possible, is not because they're hoping that they will vote in the upcoming election. I mean, maybe they are, but that's not the bigger issue. What they're doing is they're getting these people in so that they can take jobs in the United States. They can drive an Uber. They can deliver Grubhub. They can, work construction, whatever. And those jobs pay taxes, and they show up in the jobs reports. And so if you've been following the jobs reports that are coming out of the federal government lately, you'll see that they're at the all-time highs. I mean, they're just like, they're skyrocketing. The number of people getting jobs in the United States is skyrocketing. And the Biden administration has been crowing about that and saying, the Biden economic policies are working. The U.S. economy is doing great because they're, look at all these new jobs. Knit diver, some of them don't pay tax. If somebody's working under the table, then they're not going to pay taxes. And a lot of people do work under the table, don't get me wrong. But I'm talking specifically about jobs like Uber driver, jobs like a Grubhub delivery guy, something like that. Here's how that works. Let me explain how that works. A Pakistani comes into the United States illegally, and he cannot work legally in the United States. But there are people out there who maybe are other Pakistanis who have gotten their residency and they can work legally. What they do is they go out and they buy a fleet of cars, and they sign those cars up to be Uber drivers under different names or whatever. And then they let these illegal migrants drive the Uber as if they are the person who the car is registered under. And then the Uber company is paying taxes on that income. The guy that has the business is paying taxes on the income, even if the migrant himself is not filing a tax return. You see what I'm saying? So it does actually work. Carol, I'm not in Panama. I'm still in Armenia because I'm waiting on a new passport. But we're talking about migration in Panama and elsewhere. So it makes the jobs reports look better to have all these illegal migrants in the United States getting jobs, working. And the way we know that is if you go look at the number of the job growth for American-born workers, it's stagnant or even declining somewhat. So then we've had all this job growth, so to speak, the job growth that the Biden administration claims in the United States, but almost all of the growth in the jobs market is being driven by illegal migrants. Almost all of it. And so because of that, the Biden administration wants more illegals in the United States right now. And if they happen to vote illegally in the next presidential election for Joe Biden, they'll, well, it happens, right? Now, let's contrast that with Panama. Panama has paper ballots in their presidential election. They just finished a new presidential election. Paper ballots only. You got to show an ID in order to vote. Like most countries on planet Earth. Most countries in the world require an ID to be able to vote. I mean, I got to show an ID to rent a car. I got to show an ID to get into, the airport. I got to show an ID to do all sorts of things. Heck, I got to show an ID to pick up my own kid from Sunday school. It's an obvious ploy to allow people to vote who shouldn't be voting, to not require some sort of voter registration, or you show an ID when you go to vote in the United States. Now in Panama, you do have to show an ID, and it's a paper ballot only. Panama just elected its new president. The way it works is the terms in Panama are 5 years, and a president can only serve one term at a time, but they can't serve back-to-back terms, but they could serve more than one term if it's not back-to-back. In this case, the outgoing president, who was a big sycophant of the World Economic Forum and wanted really badly to play with the big boys in the leftist cabal of UN-loving, bootlicking type people. Let's see here. I'm going to take that. There we go. That looks better. I don't like that fake bokeh on the background. It looks weird. Anyway, so the outgoing president of Panama thought that when he was asked what his greatest achievement was as president, he pointed to his COVID policies, his policy during the COVID crisis, as the best thing possible that he did during his tenure. Somebody said I just froze up. Did I freeze up? No, I'm still going. We got 1,200 people online. Please go hit the like button, folks. Now, let me just explain what the COVID policy was in Panama, and you decide whether you think that was a good thing for the president to point to and say that was his greatest achievement. When COVID hit Panama, Panama shut down their airports and their borders, nobody in or out of the country. They locked down everybody, house arrest. You had to stay in your house. You could, this is how it's supposed to work. You could have one person from your family leave your home one time a week for 1 hour and go to the grocery store. But that was the only thing they could do. You couldn't go for a walk, even by yourself. You couldn't leave your apartment if you lived in a high-rise building with no balcony. You couldn't go out and get some fresh air. Kids couldn't go to school, couldn't go to work. You were prohibited from buying or selling alcohol or from drinking alcohol in your own house. You were prohibited from drinking your own alcohol in your own house. And take a guess how long this went on for. Yeah, Peacorn says, well, how long was that? I was there in Panama for, yeah, I'm not a huge drinker either, Lottie, but I mean, come on. The government doesn't get to tell me what I'm going to do in my own house, right? That almost makes me want to take up drinking because that's not, and I guarantee you the president and his family and everybody, that was making those stupid rules, they were not abiding by those things. But they would arrest you if they found out you were drinking in your own house, even just a glass of wine at dinner or anything. You were prohibited from consuming alcohol. So that went on. We stayed there for 10 and a half weeks before I finally said, okay, I'm out. I'm not doing this. And we got an emergency humanitarian flight by the U.S. Embassy in Panama back to the United States. But Panama kept their people locked down like that under home arrest for 10 and a half months. Months. And they so scared the people of Panama. They didn't educate them. They didn't get on TV and say, here's how this virus works. Here's how you avoid catching a virus. No, they went out of their way to scare people in Panama to the point where, to this day, many of the people that are campesinos, the lower class people in Panama, are still afraid of fresh air. They will not go outside to this day without wearing a mask, even if they're alone, just going for a walk in the street. And that was the old president's finest hour. And I have to say I disagree. Now, the old president also did not do much, if anything, to slow or stop the flow of migrants through the Darien Gap. So under his watch, under that 5-year watch, his tenure, the number of migrants going through the Darien Gap in a year went from tens of thousands to 500,000. And that's on him. He could have stopped that. As a matter of fact, if you asked me what his greatest achievement was, I would say it did come during COVID, but it was the fact that he literally closed the Darien Gap completely for 10 and a half months. All they did was they just said, because of the COVID crisis, if you come illegally into the Republic of Panama through the Darien Gap, you will stay in the Darien jungle, in a camp in the jungle, until the COVID crisis is over. And it came to a screeching halt because nobody wants to live in the Darien. It's not a fun place to live, especially if you're in a camp. and it stopped. So he proved that it's possible. He could have stopped it. He could have kept it stopped, but he opened it back up again and started letting those people through. And that was had a direct impact on the immigration crisis in the United States. Linda Osborne says, what was the reasoning for the alcohol ban? The reasoning was that if we lock everybody in their homes and they have nothing else to do, they can't go to work, can't go to church, kids can't go to school, there's nothing else to do but just sit around and drink. That's what people are going to do. And there's going to be a spike in child abuse and drunkenness and things like that. And so we can't trust people to make their own decisions. So we've got to make it illegal for them to drink in their own houses. If you're wondering, it didn't actually help a whole lot. There was still a spike in things like suicides and people beating their wives or children, lots of domestic violence and abuse and stuff like that. And so the alcohol ban didn't help. Probably would have, anybody that's ever known an alcoholic knows that for many alcoholics, it's worse if they don't have the alcohol on their family. Well, they, yeah, right. So why not make alcohol illegal altogether at that point? Well, they did make it illegal altogether for that period of time, but then they started letting people use it again. So yeah, now alcohol is again legal in Panama to consume and buy and sell, but for that 10.5 months, it was illegal. And it was terrible. I mean, the health minister of Panama would get on TV, this condescending fat woman. Look, there's a lot of people that have problems with obesity, but if you're going to be the health minister, maybe that, you shouldn't have a problem with obesity. But the health minister would get on TV and say, now the numbers are going down, numbers of infections are going down. So if you will be good little boys and girls, we will allow you to have one beer this weekend. If you're good, only if you're good. I mean, to an American, that kind of attitude is just so offensive. Don't treat me like a 9-year-old, But for Panamanians, they were like, oh, okay, we'll be good. Panamanians are by and large it's a very patronizing sort of government system. Anyway, so the new president was elected on a platform of stopping the illegal migration through the Darien Gap, because the Panamanian people eventually found out. How did they find out? Because people like me, people like Oscar Blue Ramirez, people like Ben Berquam, people like Michael Yon kept pounding and pounding and pounding this message about the crisis coming through the Darien Gap, kept bringing more and more journalists down, getting the word out, especially Oscar Ramirez, because he's a Spanish-speaking journalist. And he just got famous in Panama by putting stuff out on TikTok and social media. And the Panamanians started to wake up and say, wait a minute, we got a serious problem here. We got to do something about this. So the new president, Jose Raul Molino is his name, ran on a platform of, I will stop the illegal migration through the Darien Gap. And he won with 37% of the vote. He won the presidency. So this reporting that we do, I come on here and I talk for an hour almost every day, whether it's on CBN's channel or my own channel. It's easy on this end to feel like I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to a wall here because I can't see any of you. It's easy to get frustrated and feel like you're not making a difference. But when you see something like this happen, where the Panamanian people were awakened to a huge crisis in their country that was being hidden from them, and they voted to stop it made a difference in that country. And it makes me feel really proud to have been part of that. Now, here's a question. Did you know Atlanta lost the MLB All-Star game because Georgia changed their election law? I don't even follow hockey, George, so I don't know. And when it comes to sports, I don't really care what happened. It's hard for me to be a sports guy. You can imagine, I spend my time in war zones all around the planet, watching people dying, watching people starving, watching people having their lives and their homes destroyed. And you can imagine why it'd be a little bit difficult for me to really care at all about what happens on a court with a basketball or a baseball or a football. I don't even find it entertaining, to tell you the truth. I find it just sort of pedantic. But that's just me, and I'm not criticizing anybody who does enjoy sports. I'm just saying I don't enjoy sports because of my profession. Yeah, Hugh, that was a joke. Baseball, not hockey. Yeah, I knew that. That's okay. You didn't get my joke. Tim Lobb says, question, how easy is it for the Panamanian government to close the Darien Gap? Now, this is a very good question, Tim. We know it's possible because Panama did it during COVID. And it did it under duress. It didn't want to do it, but it felt like it had to because it was trying to stop the transmission of COVID coming up through the Darien Gap. So we know they can. The real question is not can they, it's do they have the political will to do so? Because what they will have to do is say, if you come into Panama through the Darien Gap, we will build a large camp down there and you will be forced to stay in the Darien Gap for a minimum of 12 months before we will allow you to leave. That's it. That's all they have to do. People will stop coming because they don't want to spend a year in the Darien Gap, I promise. That's what happened during COVID. The people that had tried to come through and got stuck, they ended up spending a year in camps down in the Darien, and it was so miserable, they stopped coming. It just stopped. And Panama is actually in the process right now of building a camp deep in the Darien jungle that will hold something like 15,000 migrants. So they could do it. But at the rate they're going, if they don't do that, what this president is saying, President Molino is saying, if you come into Panama through the Darien Gap, we will deport you, not let you go to the United States. We will send you back to your country of origin. The problem is Panama does not have the resources to send 10,000 people every day back to their country of origin. They just don't. They just don't. If they could send 1,000 people a day, I'd be surprised. And so for the new president of Panama to say that he's going to stop the migration through the Darien Gap, he's going to have to take a much harder stance on it than he has currently taken. He's hoping that by saying, just putting the word out there, if you come into Panama illegally, we will deport you back to your country of origin, people will stop coming. But that won't stop people from coming, I promise you. How do I know? Well, all I have to do is look at the messaging that the Biden administration under Alejandro Mayorkas has been putting out for a couple of years now, as they've seen this migration crisis in the United States just going off the rails and hurting them politically. They've been saying all the right things. Do not come illegally into the United States. That is not a justified way. You know, like I said, I read the tweet from the U.S. Embassy in Panama saying, under the laws of the United States, the majority of people who come across the border illegally do not qualify for asylum in the United States. Asylum laws do not provide protection against general violence or economic reasons from your home country. So they're saying the right things, and they have been actually for some time. but it hasn't stopped. People just go, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, we know you have to say those things, but we see your actions, and your actions are you're allowing people into the United States, you're giving them work permits, you're giving them asylum hearings 3 years from now. So we know you're not serious about what you're saying, and since you're not serious about what you're saying, we're going to keep coming. So if I could give some recommendation to Jose Raul Mulino, President Mulino of Panama, the new president, I would say, sir, you must take a much harder stance on the migration, but you only have to do it for a short period of time. You just have to be tough for just a little while, and the migration will stop of its own accord. If you say to the migrants, if you come illegally into the Republic of Panama through the Darien Gap, we will hold you in a camp in the Darien for a minimum of 1 year. Just say that. That's all you have to say. And within a month's time, the flow will cease. But you have to do it. You have to follow up on it. You have to actually hold them. Don't let them go. You have to keep the people there for a year. You could probably get support from the Panama's already getting money from the United States for these camps that they're opening up down there. So they could probably get support from somebody to do it. But there's one other thing that the president of Panama needs to do if he's serious about stopping the migration. And that is he has to stop the organizations who are funding and facilitating the illegal migration all the way up to the United States. Organizations like the United Nations OIM, Organization for Immigration and Migration. The UNHCR, the UN High Commission for Refugees. The Soros-funded NGOs. Alianza Fronteriza is one. There's a whole bunch. And they all have offices in Panama in what they call the City of Knowledge. It used to be called Fort Clayton in Panama City. They get sort of special status in Panama, these NGOs do. And we have been reporting for years, and nobody in the Panamanian government would listen. We've been saying these organizations are working against Panama's best interests by facilitating the movement of people, by encouraging people to come. And if they are encouraging people to come, you should put a stop to them. You should kick them out. And so, President Mulino, if you're watching this, I would tell you, if you want to truly stop the illegal migration through your country, you have to kick out the Organization for Immigration and Migration. You have to kick out the UNHCR. There are no refugees, true refugees, coming through your country. There are none. None of the people. Do you know the number of Chinese migrants coming into Panama has gone up 7,000% in the last couple of years? 7,000%. All you have to do is take a hard stand. That advice goes double for the next president of the United States. Whoever it is, if the next president of the United States happens by some miracle to be serious about stopping the illegal immigration into the United States, he can do it. He can do it. It won't be difficult. It won't be expensive. It'll actually save America tons of money. All they have to do is say, you have to wait in Mexico for your asylum hearing. That's what Donald Trump did, and it worked. It worked. Are we going to ever get it to 0 people coming across? No, we're not. That's okay. But we will get it. We could get it to an insignificant number once again. It doesn't take a pandemic. It doesn't take the National Guard shoulder to shoulder along the border. It doesn't take anything like that. It just takes the political will to do so. It is possible to close the border. There are lots of examples of closed borders around the world. There's a closed border between Israel and Lebanon, for example. There's a fence. You don't cross that fence. If you cross the fence, you're going to die. There's a closed border between Armenia and Iran. People don't cross that border illegally. It's just a barbed wire fence. It's nothing fancy. It's not near as nice as the Trump wall. It's just a 10-foot tall barbed wire fence with cameras. But you don't cross that border illegally because you will die. You won't go to jail. You'll be shot. So it is possible. The question is, does anybody on the ballot today actually have the political will to put a stop to it? I don't know what the answer is to that. We know Joe Biden doesn't want to put a stop to it. He wants to look like for the next few months he's doing something about it. He wants to make it look better. That's why he went to Mexico. He met with Manuel Lopez Obrador, the president there. He made a deal with him and gave him $60 billion in promises so that he would stop the traffic, or at least slow roll the traffic coming into the United States for a time up until the election. It's also why the Biden administration has jumped all over, has worked very, very hard to get migrants to go to centers in Colombia, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, in Guatemala. Go to centers there. Get your asylum claim adjudicated ahead of time and get pre-cleared to come in the United States so that the numbers of people coming in illegally look like they're going down, but only because they're not coming across the southern border and being caught by the Border Patrol anymore. They're getting on a plane in Caracas or Havana and flying directly into the heartland of the United States with a pass from the Biden administration to get in, and money, by the way. They are doing everything they can to continue to allow people into the United States because they want the people, but to try to make it look like the illegal migration crisis is decreasing. And they've been successful at making it look like that, even though that's not. You listen to, I call her the Muppet, you listen to Karine Jean-Pierre. If you only listen to her, you'd think, wow, the migration crisis has abated. We're doing great. The Border Patrol is stopping them at the border. They're not letting them in anymore. It's just not true. They are picking them up in Havana and in Caracas and flying them into the United States. How is it not an impeachable offense? I don't know. How this doesn't rise to the high crimes and misdemeanors threshold, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. So I think that we should applaud Panama for electing a new president who claims he will stop the migration crisis in his country, because in so doing, it will take about 500,000 illegal migrants off the table for our country, if he actually does it. Now, again, he doesn't have the wherewithal to do so the way that he says he's going to do it, which is just deporting people, because he doesn't have the money to deport enough people. You've got 10,000 people a day coming into your country illegally. He doesn't have the money to deport those people. But he can start. It's a start, and we'll take it, right? Okay, so we got 5 more minutes. You got any questions? I see somebody that said question and then didn't put a question. So let's see here. Well, your question went away. Okay. Yes, they are spending taxpayer dollars to do this. They've spent millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars on the Panamanian, in Panama, assisting the Panamanian government to facilitate the movement of migrants into the United States, to make it easier. And a lot of migrants that would have gone through Panama don't have to go through Panama anymore because they can now go through Nicaragua, because Nicaragua changed their laws, changed their immigration laws or their visa laws to allow Cubans and Venezuelans, Haitians, stuff like that, to skip Panama altogether and go through fly through Nicaragua without a visa, change planes, and go straight to the United States. So that's one more way they're getting through. Now, one other tweet I wanted to point out from the U.S. Embassy in Panama. It says, migrants, don't be fooled by fraudsters. The CBP One app, which is a iPhone app that CBP put out to allow people to apply for asylum before they leave their home country or in a transitional country like Mexico. They can go on this app and they can apply ahead of time so that they can get in line, so to speak. But there have been a lot of problems with this app, and this is addressing that. It says CBP One, which is the name of the app, is ready to help you get your appointment to come to the United States. The application eliminates the middlemen, eliminates the contrabandistas, it calls it. It reduces the exploitation of migrants and increases their safety. So it actually is admitting that the CBP One app is not intended to reduce illegal migration. It's not intended to reduce the number of people coming across into the United States. On the contrary, it's actually intended to increase the number of people coming to the United States. And it says right here on the U.S. Embassy Panama Twitter page, the CBP One app is ready to help you get your appointment to come to the United States. This is an app paid for by taxpayers, put out by the federal government, that is intended to help illegal migrants get an appointment to come to the United States and to make it safer and easier for them to do so. Well, if you make something safer and easier, would that, do you think that would make people more likely to come or less likely to come? What do you think? I think it would make people more likely to come. And so that pretty lady on my phone is the lady that lets me share her bed. She has been my woman for 30 years, and I'm very proud to say so. So, are you still able to vote in American elections? Yes, I am. I'm still an American citizen, just because I am almost never in the United States. I do have residency in Panama. It's like a green card, but I'm not a resident of, I'm sorry, I'm not a citizen of Panama. I don't have a passport there or anywhere else besides the United States. Actually, I don't have a passport really at all right now because I've had to put in for a new passport here in Armenia. So I'm waiting for my new one. Won't the Biden administration do what they did in Mexico and pay Panama to allow them to pass through? That's essentially what they have been doing, Dawiz. They have been paying Panama to make it less painful for Panama to allow them through by helping them build camps for the migrants, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a lesbian. Do you have a problem with that? I don't think I'll catch it if that's what you mean. What in the world kind of question is that? Okay, so let's look at the other questions here. What country could American citizens sneak into illegally and get free stuff from that government? Not going to happen. Not likely. Syria, you could get free torture from the Syrian government if you snuck in there illegally. I've been in about 9 or 10 countries illegally in my career, including the United States, actually. And it's usually not a good idea. What's wrong with my passport? I happened, George, to melt my passport. Who knew that insect repellent, when combined with your passport, produces a puddle of goo that is not recognizable as an identity document anymore? And so I had to apply for a new one. And yeah, that was not cool. And it takes like a month to 6 weeks, so I may be stuck here for a while. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So let's see. Hi from Ohio. Prayers. Thank you very much. No, I didn't do it again. I did it when I was in Burma. Melted my passport. I got a emergency passport. How many of you have ever seen one of these? Let me show it to you. Hang on just a second. I'm going to show you my emergency passport. It's purple. Look at that. It's an emergency passport. United States government. And I can tell you that a lot of countries around the globe, when you show up with this thing, they go like, what is this? I don't know what to do with this. And they have to call the supervisor. And so it's a real hassle. But the bigger hassle is that there's only a couple of pages in this passport, and they're already full because I travel too much. And so I've got stamps in the, I only have like maybe 4 slots left, and that would be one trip at the rate I'm going. So I went and applied for a new real passport, and hopefully that will be here soon. I could theoretically continue to travel on this one, but since I have so few slots available in it, I couldn't go far, and I couldn't do very much. So, yeah. Jessica Noreen says, are you afraid of anything? I'm afraid of my wife. I'm afraid of upsetting my wife. No, I'm kidding. My wife is wonderful. But you don't want to make her mad. Let's just say. You don't want to make my wife angry. That's all I have to say about that. So, other than that, if you want to know my philosophy on fear, you can actually go get a book that I wrote about it called Bulletproof: The Making of an Invincible Mind. It's available on Amazon and whatever. It's a book I wrote years ago, but I really don't feel fear doing this job because of the philosophy that I learned to have in writing that book. Let's see. Yes, fear God and nothing else. You are stuck near that new grandbaby. Yep, yeah, worse things have happened. Let me tell you, worse things have happened. Okay, well, we're over an hour now, so we're going to wrap it up. I've got to go get some dinner, and we have another tour going. So I will be going live on my Hot Zone channel. So if you want to talk more about what's going on in Israel and Ukraine, go over to the Hot Zone. You can subscribe over there. It's called the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube. You can subscribe there and get notified when I'm about to go live. And I will try to go live again shortly to talk more about that. No, that's Mount Ararat behind me, not water. Through the trees there, there's a great view of Mount Ararat, but there's some clouds right now, so you probably can't see the whole thing. All right, so let's pray. Let's pray for the United States, for our elections, et cetera, et cetera. All right? Lord God, we come to you right now, and we just ask you for your favor on the United States of America. You show us in Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs 14, that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And so when we look at America today, we see lots and lots of sin and less righteousness. And so we just we want to come as Americans and humble ourselves, as Canadians, as South Africans, as people from Singapore, people from Australia, all over the world, all of us can look at our government, look at our officials, can look at the people in our country, and we can say that righteousness does not look like it's ascending. It looks like it's decreasing. And so we're sorry for that, Lord. And we pray that you would let us as righteous, that we would be able to be righteous. As you say in the first chapter of Psalm, Lord, of the book of Psalms, that blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. Let our delight be in your law, Father, and count that toward our nation as righteousness. Lord, I pray for our leaders, even those who are corrupt. I pray that you would convict them. I pray that you would cause their sin to be exposed. And I pray that the American people, the people of Panama, would be blessed because they vote in good leaders. And I pray that you would give their leaders wisdom and discernment and strength and courage. Courage to do the hard things, not the politically expedient things, the difficult things, the right things, even if they're costly. Lord, I pray that we would be able to continue to pray for our leaders, whoever they are, even if they're not on our political team, that we would have a heart for those leaders and that they would have a heart for us. And I pray, Lord, that you would help us to remember that we are not citizens of any country. We are citizens of heaven. And we're just temporarily sojourning through these countries. And so help us to focus on the things that are eternal. And in so doing, give a absolutely fearless, confident, joyful face to those who are suffering around us. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, folks, thank you very much for watching. Again, you can go follow me on chuckholton.com, and you can look at all my articles and photographs and putting up lots of pictures of our trip here in Armenia, some of the stuff that's going on. And you can go to the Hot Zone as well. So please like and subscribe to the CBN YouTube channel. We always, that helps us out a lot. And if you'd like to actually contribute to CBN, you can go to cbn.com and do it there and actually get a tax write-off. So I would encourage you to do that. God bless you all. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.